Varun Singh that it should not have been leaked. It's supposed to be a sealed cover report. It almost suggests that the commissioners were wanting to build a certain mahal, a certain narrative, so that in some ways seeking to push the court's hand on what should be done, and therefore Sanjay Hegde uses that to make the argument that the court should dismiss this report.
Well, actually, it will go very much heavily against the report itself, for the simple reason that now that the commissioner is also being sacked, the validity, there was already an allegation of biasness against that person. So by virtue of doing all this, by making a case stronger for one side or the other, I think it probably will go against only for the simple reason that now they have more, one party will have more to say on the issues of biasness. But as Sanjay sir rightly pointed out, the question at first which has to be decided and which will be decided by the Supreme Court is qua Section 4. And Section 4 of the Places of Worship Act, where whether any suit can be maintainable or not. But let me just point out one interesting fact, that the Places of Worship Act is already under question, because it carves out an exception for two worship places and says that besides those two, everything else, all the other suits will abate. And for that particular reason, the validity has been questioned, that why have they carved out an exception for two religious places, whereas the other places cannot have any suit going on. Having said that, that is one part of the debate. The other part of the debate is that Section 4(3) has an exception, which I hear it's in the public domain, is being read out to support the case of people who have filed the suit, stating that any places which are covered under the Ancient Monuments Act, those suits come out of the Act of Places of Worship Act, and therefore those suits may lie. But that also is another dichotomy, because the Ancient Monuments Act also bars civil suits. So I don't know how what kind of...
Aman Lekhi, do you buy the argument put out by Sanjay Hegde and by Varun Singh that because the commissioners seem to have leaked this report, wanting to build a public narrative, this will go against them in the Supreme Court, because this was meant to be a sealed cover report and you can't leak to the public and to the media a report which was given to you in confidence to send only back to the courts?
Well, it's a question of propriety, and of course, by the fact that it's leaked, the issue of propriety does reach the center stage, and in fact questions may arise as to how it has happened. However, that element of surprise or the case of bias is something I don't buy, because as far as this particular place of worship is concerned, the historical fact which stare us in the face and history which is replete with incidents, it is not in any way surprising that in a mosque pieces of temple, in fact the wall or even a shivling is found. So the fact that the local commissioner's report has actually shown that something actually exists is not something which should take us by astonishment and surprise, because it is something which was more or less we presumed to have happened. That said, the matter before the court, the courts are aware of how things actually unravel and proceed. The mere fact that the report has actually been leaked would not in any way affect what the court will do. The issue here is, however, the 1991 Act. The 1991 Act is absolutely clear, and I personally think it serves a laudable social purpose. And as far as the question of scrutiny as to the status or entitlement for probe to actually ascertain whether it's a place of worship belonging to one community or other is something which should be beyond judicial scrutiny. I'm not saying that as far as the Act is concerned, the Act does not have flaws, but insofar as laws are concerned, as long as they are aligned broadly with principle of justice, notwithstanding the fact that there are certain flaws in it, public interest mandates that the laws be permitted to operate. And in this particular fact, I personally think that the Act in question, in its very substance, acknowledges what everyone knows, that is the historical excesses of tyrants, and while acknowledging it, nevertheless says that because the legal system is substituted by one where the rule of law governs, and the system which was prevalent in the times of empires is no longer current, says that as far as the situation at the time of independence is concerned should persist, because as far as the law is concerned, it cannot operate retroactively on past incidents, nor can it visit consequences from a different era into an era where the law on which we rely today was not in place. And as far as the communities today are concerned, to the extent that they are having access to places of worship, they are not in any way responsible for the sins of the ancestors. and should be left untouched insofar as the expression of and the undertaking of whatever rituals and beliefs they actually have to undertake.